Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. This is Kendall of Me Oregon Transcription and Content Creation Services, and I am here today for another of the Sparkle and Shine interview series. Today we'll be talking with Jaya Manske. So just give me a second and let's get her on, and then we will get her going. Okay, let's see here. Make sure she knows. All right, I see her. Let's see. We can add her. So cool technology. It's like so much fun now. It's so much more fun than it once was.
Hi.
Hi, Jaya. How are you?
Good. How are you? Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Oh, I can hear you great. And you know what? You have that beautiful blue sky behind you. That's awesome.
Yes, no power this morning at the house. And so it changed life a little bit. So I drove down about 35 minutes or so to where there would be cell phone bars, because when there's no Wi-Fi, there's no connection to the outside world there. So
exactly. I would imagine. I could totally get it. I am just making sure that we're not going to get an echo with the computer.
Okay.
Stop doing that. It won't stop doing that. Hold on. Okay, there we go. I was like, I've done this before, but I'm clicking all the wrong things. Okay. Well, anyway, yeah, so let's get started. I'll go ahead and do the quick intro, tell people just a little bit about you. You'll share as well, and then we'll go from there, okay?
Okay, sounds good. I was wishing I had a different setup this morning, but I don't. So we'll just go with it.
You know what? Setup is like a thing, right? I actually did the last Sparkle and Shine I did. I actually I have to fix the audio, like it's that bad, because I was in a different location than usual, and I didn't even like have headphones. I didn't even think to bring them, and so there's this awful echo every time I speak, and it's horrible. Yeah, so I'm trying to fix the. Yeah, right. It's like, and I told my husband, I said, oh my gosh, I did not have headphones, and it was awful. The interview was awesome, but like my whole thing was terrible. And yeah, so you know what? So setups are like, it's fine. I mean, this is the internet world, right? So
exactly, and it's part of just going for it, however you are.
Yes,
it's part of the lesson.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, so let's tell people what we're doing here. Okay. So once again, this is Kendall of Me Oregon Transcription and Content Creation Services, and I created the Sparkle and Shine interview series, because I wanted to bring other entrepreneurs and small business owners on, talk about their business, talk about life, talk about different themes as it relates to, living and like doing, and of course we'll talk business, but we'll also just really just talk about life, because what's business without life? So, and today I have this awesome lady. I know I say that every week, right? But I have this awesome lady, Jaya. Jaya Manske and I met each other in the online space, and I just really like what Jaya has to offer. I like her presence. I like her, like the way her like soul like comes out. And anyway, she's just fun. So I asked to see if she wanted to be on. Of course, she wants to be on, because she's got really awesome stuff to share with the world. And she works in compassion. She works with compassion. She's a compassion coach. So she works with people doing stuff like that. But she's going to talk a little bit about herself, and then we'll just kind of kick this thing off. I see we've got some guests today watching. Thank you, everybody who's there. Anybody who's dropping in late or watching the replay, just let us know below that you're watching the replay. And so anyway, so Jaya, go ahead and tell us a little bit about you and your business. And, because I want this to be more of an organic conversation, I don't really have a lot of interview questions prepared. I do have a couple if we need to, just kind of get ourselves going and into the flow. But first, just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then let's just chat.
Thank you so much, Kendall, for the warm introduction. That's really sweet. It's really, as Kendall mentioned, we met on the online space, and it's just been really sweet to see how interconnected we all are, how there are so many other women in the online space who are heart-centered and looking to make a difference in the world. And so I just really appreciate you inviting me on. And so, yes, I am a coach, and I coach women to love themselves and shift their relationship with themselves. Our relationship with ourselves is the biggest relationship we'll ever have, and so many of us don't actually like ourselves, and so it's so incredibly important for achieving any of your dreams. Oftentimes it sort of organically comes out of a different kind of goal. People have goals to create businesses, to retire early, to travel the world, whatever their goal is. Underneath it, if they're not deeply loving themselves, that tends to be the hurdle. So that's just a little bit. And so my company is called Coaching Compassion. And I also incorporate interpersonal neurobiology, which is a great synthesis of so many different disciplines, including attachment theory, neurobiology, positive psychology, psychology. It's just a really interesting field. So I incorporate that into my coaching, as well as what's called nonviolent communication, or compassionate communication, sometimes referred to as, and resonant language. So that's just a little bit about me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so tell us, just to kind of get us rolling, tell us, Jaya, how or why it is that you came to the online space with your coaching.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a story. I'll do my best to keep it short. In 2015, I was really battling my own burnout. I had been a teacher for a decade, and actually about nine and a half years. And I was getting sick all the time, and I kept getting injured. And I had swapped out of teaching and into, I guess at this point I was already out of teaching a couple of years, but I swapped into what's called psychosocial rehabilitation, which is working with foster youth and also foster families. And I continued to battle my own, what seemed like burnout. And one day on the job, I just innocently, I was walking down a hill with a 14-year-old client, and I slipped, and I ended up injuring myself really, really badly. And so in that moment, my whole life totally flipped upside down along with me. And so during my recovery process, it turned out that I had totally severed 2 ligaments in my ankle. I had fractured the inside of my bone, so they didn't even know that it was fractured for several months. And my health journey just took a turn. And it was on the same day that I got diagnosed with my very first autoimmune disease. And so it was just a cascade of things that were happening. And so in this really dark period for me, I had all sorts of other health issues prop up at the same time because of the level of stress my body was under. And I was seeing an acupuncturist, and I was so exhausted. I was suffering from anemia, and I had studied acupuncture in college for a little while. And so she said I had a blockage, and I said, "Can you tell me more about it?" Because I wanted to know. And she said, "It's a blockage around your heart, and it's a blockage that happens to people who don't see a future for themselves." And it was so true in that moment. I couldn't walk. I hadn't been able to walk for months. And I'll speed this up just a little bit. But in that moment, she said to me, she didn't realize it, but she was being my coach in that moment. She said to me, "Jaya, your body doesn't work right now, but your brain works great. What can you do right now to set up the life that you want?" And so in that moment, I had a decision point, and I could either go back to school to become a marriage and family therapist, or I could go to coaching school. And my father actually convinced me that coaching school was really probably more in a line for me because of the philosophy and outlook. And so coaching was a way of bringing myself out of this really dark period for myself. And a darker period than I even realized, because I had been struggling for years at that point on an emotional and mental level. And having this time with myself where I couldn't do anything really requires you to look at your relationship with yourself. And so I didn't go to a school that talked about self-love, but that was the journey that I was on. That was the journey that I had to be on just in order to just live with myself. When everything else is taken away, you get a really good look at what's underneath all the ways in which we distract ourselves, all the ways in which we keep ourselves busy and avoiding ourselves. And I had nothing else to do but to just look at it. And so it really forced me to face some things. And so on my journey, I ended up just really focusing, and it's like life unfolded in such a way that provided me, I think because I set this intention for being kinder to myself, because what I realized was that I had this like scathing inner critic. I was just so incredibly mean to myself. And I know I'm not alone in that experience. And so I said, I can't do this anymore. You know, I had been in an abusive relationship when I was younger for about 7.5 years. And his voice was embedded in my mind, in my brain. And when I realized I had become my own abuser, I knew I needed to shift things. And so I really headed on a path of how can I change this? And so through my coaching work, through diving in deeper into self-empathy, through learning interpersonal neurobiology, I was really able to transform that. So it's a really long story, but that's how I ended up having to transform it.
Well, but that's very true, Jaya. And here's the thing that I always find is that this is what I've observed. This is what I've heard from other people just in general in life. And I have gone through things like this, right? I've gone through these periods where I get this incredible transformation, if you will, right? Or this incredible growth, or this incredible recognition or awareness or self-love or recognition, whatever you want to call it. I always have seen, observed, and experienced for myself that it's almost like it has to be in some dark. And when I say dark, I don't mean like, oh, it's a little bit cloudy. I mean like dark.
Stormy.
Like, yeah, right. Occasionally, if you've started that path, you know, then okay, you see the clouds coming and you can start to address that, you know, which I know is part of what you coach women to start to see their own, you know, patterns and behaviors. But until you have gone into that very, very, very dark place, like the first time, sometimes the second time, even third and fourth.
For me, it was my third.
Yeah.
It had been sort of like years. It'd been 5 years at that point of like pneumonia, of another injury. And then this, and then with the pneumonia, I was like, okay, I know I need to take care of me. I'm not giving, at that time I was working 80 hours a week. I was like totally diving, and I knew I was doing it to totally avoid myself. And I was aware of it. Like I knew that's what I was doing. I was like, I don't want to deal with this brain of mine. I'm just going to keep going. And in that moment, I was like laid out flat, and I was like, okay, I guess I better love me. I better do this. And I thought I was doing a little better, but the truth is I hadn't even touched it. And so much of it is like when you have lived through trauma, it has a particular impact on the way that your brain works. It has an impact on your life, and we have to rebuild the neural connections. And luckily our brains are really plastic, and so we can totally change this. But
I
we have
know.
but we have to rebuild those neural connections so that we can be warm with ourselves. And if we've grown up in a way where we haven't been held, where we haven't been told you make sense, we don't have those connections, and we need to build them. And at any moment in our lives, we're able to do that. At any moment, we're able to begin to build those neurons. It is not a lost cause, but it is hard to climb out of these places where, when we've turned so far away from ourselves that we can't even connect anymore, where we don't like ourselves. It is really a courageous act to say, I'm going to look at this. I'm going to be with you, and I'm going to be with you when you're sad. You
And
don't have
I
to.
have to tell you, so like, okay, so I've always kind of been like a laugher, right? I've just always been sort of like that. And but there was a point in life, when I was younger. I was in my early to mid 20s. Well, I was closer to the mid 20s. So, and there was a one particular woman that I know. She lives somewhere else. We don't live in the same area anymore, but um, she would laugh, and she had just like this grand laugh, and it was like so full of like fun and joy. And I mean, it was just a really good laugh. And let me tell you something, she used to intimidate me. I was intimidated by her because she could laugh like that. And it wasn't because I didn't have laughter, but I didn't at that time know what it was like to be so good with myself that I really could like laugh, not as just a reaction and not as just in response to a situation or a person or a joke or whatever, or sarcasm. Let's not even go there. But it became, but I was like, I'm not afraid of her. I mean, I thought she was a kind woman. And it was so funny because she was like she's like taller than me. And I mean, she she probably had like 40 years on me at that point, or at least 30. Right. And I was just like, oh my God, I don't think I'll ever be like that woman. And you know what? Within about a year or so of me doing some of my stuff at that time, I am now that person. I am now that person. Like sometimes I am just like, woo! And I have to occasionally, I have to like reread a situation and just make sure that I'm not just being overpowering and not just hiding behind the fact that I can do that. Because I have found, and I don't know if you know this to be true for yourself, Jaya, but sometimes I have to watch that I'm not even hiding behind my own good, because sometimes I'll use my good as a defense, or like as a defense, instead of just it being what it is. And but that's the thing about self-love though, isn't it? Right? Like instead of me having that voice that I also have and still struggle with, of like, oh my God, don't act like that, Kendall. Oh my God, you're being over the top. Then I have to be like, okay, let's just give someone else an opportunity, or let's just calm down a little bit. Let's just step back instead of like, oh my God, Kendall, stop doing that, right? So and it's like you said, it's like you have to really, I call it tuning in. I mean, it's the same thing, right? But I really have to just even tune in to the nice voice, like to the nice part, to the parts that, no, I really do want to live this. I don't just want to be it for other people or provide that space for other people. I have to live it, or I don't give that space. It's impossible for me to give that kind of space. And I know that I've shared with you before, that I have a background in social work.
Yes.
And I just find it so funny that like the way I was then, and I went into social work. Part of the reason I went into social work is like above, like, I'm going to help people fix themselves and I want to learn how things work and trauma and stuff like that. Beyond that, I went into social work to fix me.
Right. Yeah.
which used to be like a joke, but I think so many people get it now that like it's not a joke anymore. People who go into fields like that, not everybody is like that. I'm not making a blanket statement like that, but a lot of people recognize that there's something, and one of the ways to work on oneself is to give away something. of yourself. The trick though is, do you get overworked and tired? Look, I know what it's like to work like 60, 70 hours a week. It's not fun, especially when it's that emotional kind of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a really important point. I think it's really important to pay attention to. So many of us are run on the unconscious. You know, we're running off of the story from when we were younger, the story from the work situation we had 5 years ago. We're running off of all these little micro moments in our lives where we were told we were too much or too little, and that we need to show up in a certain way in order to get belonging. And so sometimes we make these agreements with ourselves unconsciously that we're going to only be happy, we're only going to sit in grief, or we're only going to do these things, and we really limit our life energy in that way. And most of the time we don't even know what's really happening, which is why bringing in mindfulness and awareness, and also bringing in understanding of ourselves, bringing in this knowing that we make sense, is so important. And for me, I totally relate to like hiding behind the good, because part of my, or the majority of how I ended up at this sort of bottom of the barrel moment was giving without having any sense of mutuality. It was being nice at my own expense, being kind, being compassionate, being loving at my own expense. And so the antidote is not to become unkind and unloving and stop doing what also feeds me in some way, but to find ways to honor me in the process. And that takes work, because there's so many belief systems surrounding that. There's so many beliefs about, if I ask for help, I'm weak, I'm only supposed to give, I'm a burden, etc. Like, we have so many different ways in which we keep ourselves, those who end up in giving professions, keep ourselves invisible, keep ourselves outward. So for me, I could bring kindness outward, but I couldn't bring it to me. And you know, the saying, you have to love yourself before you can love anyone else, that for me was always the most frustrating statement, because it was like, no, that's not at all true for all of us. I think it is true for many, and I think it's true on the deepest level, because in order to really love, we have to be willing to let love in. You know, in order to really sink in to that, we have to recognize that there are other loving human beings in this world who thrive just as much on love. And in fact, all of us thrive on connection. All of us really need relationship for our brains to survive. And without relationship, actually, our brains starve. And yet we have built such a world around us that locks out connection, that keeps us isolated. And so I think it's part of the awareness building in ourselves of, in what way am I turning away from myself by compulsively being kind? You know, it's a strange conundrum to find yourself in, but there's little belief systems, and in shifting the belief systems, we don't become unkind. We actually unleash a broader ability, more resource to give.
Yeah. And you know, and there's a couple of things. Okay, first of all, we are having such a deep conversation right now.
Would you like to keep it lighter?
It's like it's one of those conversations where it's like, oh my gosh, I want to pick that nugget and let's respond, and then it's like, oh my gosh, there's another one, and you can't keep up with all the pieces. You know, when I started this series, this is a side note, when I started this series, I was like, you know, I should probably take notes or something when people are talking, because I don't want to miss stuff, right? But then I was like, I would forget to do it, because it wasn't, I'm having a conversation, right? It's not a lecture, right? So
Absolutely.
I'm like, yeah, I can't do those two things. I'm just like, I'll just talk about whatever I remember, or whatever like sparks me the most. But sometimes when you have these like organic conversations, and we have these deep conversations, that like so many times you get sparked that you have to just choose something,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. And that's
So,
what it is to be in conversation with someone, is you
yeah,
just kind of roll with it, like what
yeah.
arises for you in that moment.
Mhm.
And there's such like richness in this subject. I mean, you
Yeah,
picked a really big topic for us. It's probably the most, to me, the most important topic.
yeah,
So there's a lot to say about it. So we'll
yeah,
get to what we get to. there's
yeah, right,
there's only
exactly. Yeah, I
a
don't
little
even,
taste of each of us.
yeah, I don't want to stress it. And that was part of the thing that I just had to tell myself earlier on in the series, is just like, you know what, just stop. Because it was almost like that voice, it was almost like that other, I have one of those other voices
Of
that's all
course,
about perfection and stuff, which is
of
probably
course.
where some of the criticism. And it was like, you know what, if you want to have an organic conversation, Kendall, then have an organic conversation. Just because you're hosting it, right, or you've created the series, doesn't mean that you have to like be like right on all the time, because that's not the kind of series I wanted to create. Like I told you when we talked about you coming onto the series, I really just wanted this to be organic conversation, just like
Yeah.
every time I have one. I want this to be an organic conversation. So, but anyway, so that was the side note. So just trying to remember a couple of things. Oh, I know. So one thing is, right, so you talked about the more that we love ourselves and take care of ourselves, the more we can give but receive, right? And it's this really good interchange, but we actually end up giving more because we're always receiving as well. And it reminded me, and now, okay, I know you know this, so I've got 3 kids,
Hmm.
and but I have a tattoo that I didn't get until I was 30. Okay, it was like I'll do it if you do it, with a couple girlfriends, right? So somebody needed a belly ring because she never had one, and because she already had tattoos, and then the other one already had tattoos too, so she also got a belly ring. But I had one in the past, and didn't want another one, and so I was like, I'll get a tattoo, right? So anyway, I never like thought about it. So I'm 30 years old and I get a tattoo, and I'm sitting with the tattoo guy, and he's like, what do you want? I don't know. What do you want? I'm like, can we just create something? And here's what it is. Can we just create something that I want, something that shows love and light and laughter all at once?
Mm.
And so what we came up with, what he mocked up, which I now have on my body, is so it's a shape of a heart, and there's a little bit of gradient, but the heart has like basically cutouts, right? So as if light is going in, and right, and then in the middle is just like a symbol that means laughter. And it's so funny because, and this is why I said I have all these kids, right? Because I don't think about that tattoo anymore. Like I didn't, it was a thing I did, right? And I have it, and I mean my husband, obviously, right? But I don't really think about it, and I don't see it, that tattoo, because I don't, as a mom, I don't look at myself the way I once did. Like I don't stand in the mirror and like prance or whatever. or like, oh, I'm gonna go out with the girls. I gotta like, make sure I look good or something, right? So I don't really look at it, right? But I haven't even thought about it or remembered it in like forever. Like I shower and do all this stuff, and I never notice it anymore until you were talking, and I was like, oh my God, I have a tattoo that says exactly that. It's so funny how things come up. So, I mean, that's like a side note, but it's sort of like I wanted that tattoo. So the whole part of the point of bringing it up is that I wanted that tattoo to demonstrate that, because I had gotten to that point in my life, where, I mean, I had been doing a lot of work, and yeah, it's funny that I got a tattoo at 30, and I could tell it in that way, but really it was like that's the symbol that is now on my body. This tattoo is that journey to being to being able to be in that space, and to have that space and all that kind of stuff that you're talking about, and to be that way, like to come out that way and to share with others and let others in, and so on and so forth. And anyway, so that was part of the reason I brought it up. And another super side note, I like that I keep hearing the birds chirp occasionally behind you because I think it's so fun.
Yes, I am outside. The beach is right over this little hill here, and I'm sitting with my feet in the sand. I don't know if I could show you
Awesome.
that, but you can see the ground here.
There you are, nice and grounded. How about that for grounded to have a
Yep.
conversation, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fun. That's so fun. And I mean, this is like not on topic really, but it kind of is. I mean, but that's one of the cool things about choosing to come into the online space to work with people and to reach more people. Not, yeah, there's glamour, if you would, right? And the fact that you can go on the beach and we can still work and have this conversation, right? Because of technology. But at the same time, it's sort of like, but you being at the beach and being able to put your feet in the sand while you have an intense conversation about what it is that you do and the transformation that you have and that you help other people to see and to find within themselves is really, like, I think that's very powerful. I know it may sound silly to some, but I think that kind of stuff is really powerful. I like to go on mountain forest adventures, and part of the reason that we do stuff like that is because that's how we can connect instead of just being in the city.
Yeah, absolutely. Nature's really can be incredibly important. And it's interesting. I ended up here because I would have been sitting at the kitchen table happily, but with no power and there's no cell. So here I am. And so it did. There is this opportunity. I was like, okay, it's 7 a.m. I'm going to drive down to the beach. It's like
Yeah.
there's not a whole lot of time. So my morning routine got a little bit, you know, in flux, but I was like, okay, this is what needs to happen so I can get on this call with you. And,
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for my mindfulness practice in that because I was able to just stay aware, like, and give myself some empathy about it. Like, just take for a moment and say, like, Jaya, would you just really like it if life was predictable right now? And just really sit with myself and be like, yeah. And I didn't really get flustered in a way because
Yeah.
I was able to accompany myself. I was
Yeah.
able to just be with myself in that moment of like, okay, this is what's happening. I'm going to drive down the road. I'm pretty sure there's a cell down at Baldwin Beach. And then when I got here, the gate was locked and they weren't letting cars in. So I just parked on the side and just hiked on over. And I looked for a place that had the least amount of wind because it's a little bit windy today. And, but all of that, I think if not for years and years, I've been a mindfulness practitioner since when I was an educator, I went to school at a place called Naropa University, which taught holistic and contemplative practices. And so my background is in holistic and contemplative education. And what they taught was that mindfulness and meditation is the practice of it is what you do every day in every moment. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about, yes, it's about sitting on a cushion, but it's not at all about sitting on a cushion. It's in the
Mm-hmm.
moment, being willing to notice what is happening right then and there. And
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes when you get those curveballs, it's incredibly important to say, like, oh, okay, so what's happening for me? What do
Yeah.
I notice in my body? Okay, so, and it wasn't so much this morning, but it could have very easily been that I noticed like my heart was beating a little bit faster. Am I feeling a little bit panicked? Am I feeling a little anxious? This morning, for whatever reason, I just jumped out of bed and I was like, okay, power's out. What's next? But on a
Yeah.
different morning, that absolutely could have been the experience. As someone who has struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety is part of that picture sometimes. And so
Mm-hmm.
being willing to like open up your eyes, look around, see what is, and just roll with it is incredibly important and powerful. And luckily
Yeah.
you can move into just growth and love
Mm-hmm.
and so it can really be transformative, and it's a process. I'm
It is.
constantly in
It's a process.
process. I'm
Yeah, it's
constantly
totally a
growing.
process. Yeah.
Yes.
And
And,
I
and
think,
I
but
will be growing till the day that I die. And there's so many coaches
I was
out there
going to
who are
say
like,
that.
I've got my shit figured out. Pardon my French. I've got everything figured out. I've got this, and I'm going to teach you the way that it is. And that's not at all how life is. We,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll meet someone someday that really does have it all figured out. but I think we're always in process. We're always uncovering like one more thing, going back to what you're saying, like one more thing that we're unconsciously doing where we're running on some old story that we're not even aware of. And there's always more work to be done. So anyway.
Right. Yeah, no,
lessons
but
learned from going to the beach.
but that's an important thing, right? So we can laugh and we can joke and be silly about it, but really and truthfully, I mean, and it goes back to what you said when you first were saying it, but we do have the opportunity literally every single moment to learn, grow, be, do, change, whatever you want to call it, but every single moment is an opportunity. So yeah, you can learn from going to the beach, but you can also learn because the power was out, or you can learn because like I learned a lesson. Okay, never go anywhere without headphones. Do not do it anymore, Kendall. Do not do it. Do not do it. Doesn't matter if you think you have it planned out. I never thought to bring headphones. And I had this incredible conversation, and the sound is screwy. Obviously, I'm still struggling with that. But seriously, like there's a lesson all the time. And you know, I was listening to somebody recently, just a few days ago, and they were kind of talking about that too. They come from a place of like of living well and like doing well and like finding yourself and doing your own journey, and everybody has their own journey and we don't have to compare and all that kind of stuff, right?
All true.
Which is obviously totally in line with the way I think of things, or else. But it's like it's like as a mom, right? So I'm always, all jokes aside, figuring out something new. Like literally, it's like I can tell my husband, I can tell the kids, look, I've got to do this today, I've got to do that, I've got to talk to somebody, I have a sparkle and shine today, I have this and that. And you know what? You guys probably can't hear it, but I hear them occasionally like pounding on the floor. I'm like, are you serious right now? But really, they are serious. And really, we do have wood floors, so it's kind of like,
life happens.
Right, exactly. But they're actually being pretty quiet. Like they're actually okay. And so I have to reorient my brain. Like I expect them pounding on the floor to be like interrupting or bothering what's happening. But in reality, today, right now, that's not what's happening. So because I had a kid wake up this morning and was like literally like pounding down the hall. And I'm like, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. What are you pounding for? I'm just walking. No, you're pounding. Like I'm watching you put your feet down harshly, right? And so of course I expect today for there to be like all this drama, and there've been little things because they're kids, but really it's been pretty good so far. So you know what I mean? It's like those things you have to just I always have to like reevaluate and think and like come back to center or present or ground or whatever you want to call it, and that's that mindfulness thing. But along with that, and this is kind of where I wanted to go with my long-windedness, but I know that there are people out there. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody because I don't know everybody's journey, but I know that even for me at one point in time, I didn't even really understand the concept of nonviolent, compassionate communication. And because that's something that you definitely do, I would love to hear you share a little bit about what that really is for each person, because my version of nonviolent, compassionate communication is probably a little bit different from yours, Jaya, and that doesn't make my version bad or your version good or better. It just is. But just if we could talk about, just if you could share a little bit about kind of really truly what is that concept? What does that really, really mean? Because I think, generally speaking, most people, even those of us who know what it means and maybe have studied it, still struggle with it. And so I would love to just hear you just share a little bit on that, because I know that's like, it's kind of a hallmark in a way of what you do.
Yeah. So it's really about shifting your consciousness to being aware that every single behavior that each of us has is done to meet a need, that we're always looking to do what's best, that we're always doing the best thing for ourselves in that moment, even if it's pounding on the floor. We're meeting, like, children most of the time, they're wanting to meet their need for fun and play. It's so important. As adults, we kind of forget that fun and play are important. It is equally important, maybe not equally, but it is really important. But what our play looks like is so different. This might be our play right now, as opposed to what it is for your children. And sometimes our work can be our play. In the most ideal situation, our work is play. It's not for everybody. For many people, it's sort of just running through. So I think the main principle is to recognize that every single behavior, whether we label it good or bad, however we want to label it, it is actually neither. It is just trying to take care of ourselves. It is just doing the best we can. And so sometimes it's disconnecting and sometimes it's connecting. And so when we begin to widen our lens and bring a sense of generosity to ourselves and others, we're able to be more present. It's so much easier to empathize with someone when we begin to recognize that they were doing the best that they could in that moment. And so for me, my own journey with nonviolent communication was being really good at empathizing with other people, being really good at recognizing, oh, she didn't get enough sleep, so she's just a little bit grumpy. It doesn't mean it. It's okay. Of course she's upset. And the trick was then to include myself in the picture. And so it's really a practice that takes, I've been doing this for almost 18 years. And so it's been a really long time. And in terms of getting to the point of being warm and soft with myself, that's really only in the last 3 years or so. So it really, it takes a while. And so what that sounds like in terms of, if we were going to bring a little bit of empathy to you about the situation where you were, where you forgot your headphones, is a perfect opportunity to be gentle with yourself, to just recognize, say, was that really surprising to find that the sound didn't work? Do you just really love it when things are predictable? Are you so wanting to offer your audience something that's meaningful and easy to listen to? And just really touch into what you're wanting underneath that self-criticism, underneath that gnawing thought of I should have, could have, would have, and just really sink into that sweet heart space that you come to this with, of just really wanting to contribute to yourself and to others, to your family, to your children, and to just really tap in. So, that's, maybe a more surface level thing, right? But at the same time, it makes perfect, just to give yourself recognition that it makes sense you would be upset about that. Of course you're upset. It makes so much sense that you would want to have everything, it's you just wish everything could always be pristine and perfect and clear so that people could get the value that you're really wanting to give, and just, so it's just a little bit like that. It's just really looking at it and shifting what that inner voice is. And that's hard work, because the way our brains are programmed, the way that we work, is that in the empty space where we're doing nothing, what shows up is what's called the default mode network. And that, depending on your life experiences, can be incredibly scathing or lacerating, or just a little bit of oops, just depending on what has happened. So there's a really big difference to telling yourself, oh my gosh, I'm such a, if I could have woken up this morning and be like, I'm such an idiot, I can't believe I left this out, or I can just really, and I could get so much meaner than that too, to myself. Or I can pause and give myself some, oh, was that really shocking? And just really tune in. are you feeling really anxious? Are you really wanting to make sure that you're there? You know, none of these are
Yeah.
things that exactly happened to me today, but they very well could have. And they happen to us every day. So I don't know if I answered your question exactly. It's a little bit of it's a big question to answer, but just
It is a big question, but I think it's but and so yes, you answered, but and you answered in a way that I think would be helpful to people. And using my headphone thing as an example is an awesome way to do that. Because well, and okay, so yes, I think that was an answer to a big question, but the big questions are the questions where we find ourselves, and the big questions and whatever answer, and that's part of it, that I'm sure you sometimes have these conversations with your clients, but sometimes it's whatever my answer was today may not be the answer to the same question tomorrow.
absolutely.
And that's what makes it a big question, because there is no one answer. There is no exact answer. There is no real science to it. There is like biological science. And I mean, there are parts that are science, but the actual mind part, other than the way our brain actually like functions biologically, everything else is not science. And that's the thing about these big questions, and finding the answers and finding one's way and learning to like love oneself and to be resilient, because resilience is part of self-love, and so on and so forth. I mean, everything's such a back and forth. And one of the things that came up, that I was thinking that in when I think about communication, whether it be with self or others, but also is about, obviously it's about reactions, but which I'm always working on, but it's also sometimes about listening, right? So sometimes we think at the very obvious one, which is like, well, just listen to what that person said, or what they're trying to say, or what they're telling us, right? But we also have to listen, at least my experiences, I also have to listen to what I hear when they're talking. See, I can hear what Jaya says just fine, and I can listen to what Jaya says, but you might say a word, or it could be a tone that really was nothing, but for me it was a trigger, and I have to listen to that, right? So, and I'll give an example. So, we make like at home, we make a list of certain things, right? And there's a particular thing that we put on the list, my husband put on the list about a week ago, right? And we both acknowledge, okay, yes, and we need to do this. And it's a really small thing. And we need to go get this, right? It's not an emergency. It's not like that big of a deal, right? And we haven't been to the place that has it. Like, there's only a couple stores that have it. And we haven't been to any of those locations, because we've had other things that were bigger or more important, or that we just needed to do that because they were fun, or they filled us in a different way as a family, right? And so today, one of my children, very innocently, accidentally got a little marker on my shirt. You can't really see it, right? But he got a little marker on the shirt, and nobody like flipped out about it, right? And we were like, you just have to be careful when you have markers. You want to give a hug, you have to be careful, right? And like, seriously, like, I could probably barely find it if I wanted, right? But what it did was it reminded my husband that we need to go get this particular, it's like a stain remover. It's a certain type thing. So I heard him say that, and he said, we still have to get it, and it's been on the list for a week. And my brain inside went straight to my negative default, that was, oh my God, it's been on the list for a week. Oh my God, I failed because, and honestly, I'm like articulating it really strongly right now, but that's basically what happened. And I had to stop myself, because then I'm going to spiral, and then I'm going to like lash out at him because I'm spiraling. That's not what he said. Right. He just simply said it's been on the list for a week. And that's truly what he meant. He wasn't calling me out. He wasn't calling himself out, and here's how I know this, because I said, well, we haven't been to the store, honey. And that was like my thing, to be like, that was a little strong, Kendall. Oh, and then I could hear behind, because I noticed that it was strong, I could hear myself behind that talking about how bad I am at things and how I don't have it together and how I forget things and this and that, right? All this like negative energy, when really he was just also reminding himself that yes, we still need to get this product. It had nothing to do with anybody failing. It had nothing to do with anybody not being good or right or doing well. It just was a statement. It's sort of like saying this is pink, right? Like this is like a pink color. That's what he said, but my brain went, no, it's not pink. It's this other color. No, it's
right.
pink.
Absolutely.
No, it's fine, you know? But when I think about nonviolent communication and compassionate communication, I think, like I said, I think about listening, not just to what the other person said, but listening to myself. And sometimes that's the more important part.
Absolutely. And, you know, with nonviolent communication, it's a mix of being able to be warm with yourself and being able to be warm with others. And so as human beings with a large array of experiences, of course we get triggered by little things, you know, and so in that moment, it can be as simple as, and as you build it, because in a way, NVC is it's a mindfulness practice in and of itself. That catching yourself in the moment of, whoa, that was a lot, is a moment to just be with yourself and be like, oh, do you need acknowledgement that you have a lot of responsibility as the mother of 3 children? Do you really want to contribute to your husband? Do you really want ease right now? You know, in that moment, but then also to take the deep breath and say to your husband, you know what, I want to clarify. I kind of went off over here. And with the people that we're closest to, ourselves and our family, we are the most likely to forget to take a breath before we respond. And so it is a practice in and of itself to say, what really happened here? There was an observation that your husband made. We haven't been to the store yet. Is it true? Yeah, that's true. And then what feelings arise and thoughts arise from that is where sometimes the messiness gets. But just, you know, taking a breath, like it sounds like what you did in that moment was really beautiful. Like, yes, your mind went off into the woods, you know, into the worst case scenario. He's judging me. I'm judging myself. The whole thing is happening. But in that moment of being like, whoa, that is a lot. Let me take a step back. There's a moment to recognize, like, oh, what else has happened to you today? What else has been going on around this seemingly isolated moment? How many other times has it not been just an observation? And just really acknowledging for yourself, like, or maybe as a child even, you know, maybe every single time a parent or a teacher said something, there was such a sense of responsibility at such a young age. I'm making up, you know, something that I would have to check out with you, of course, to see.
You're not far off.
But it can be something that really you just be like, yeah, do you need acknowledgement that oftentimes everything has been your responsibility? And maybe it's, you know, because we have to get used to part of that healing component, part of learning to be in relationship with ourselves and others is learning that other people can be there for us too. And when we've lived life sort of oftentimes with that perfectionism, I know very well, there's like, we've sort of had the story, we have to do it all alone. And so learning like, I'm not in this alone is a really challenging thing to move toward. It's really vulnerable to move toward.
Yeah.
So it's all a practice. Self-love in itself is a practice. And I don't mean a practice in terms of you sit in front of the mirror and you say, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself. I don't mean that at all. There are some people who totally, that's their style. That's what they like. But I think that our bodies have to believe what we're saying in order for the thoughts to actually take hold. Our body actually is running more of the story than even our thoughts. So if our bodies don't feel safe, if our bodies don't feel understood, then it doesn't matter how many positive affirmations I make, it's not going to work. But when I bring acknowledgement, when I bring understanding to my whole being, those thoughts can start to shift. and I can make a little bit more room for the possibility that actually when I was little, I wasn't safe. But in this
Yeah.
moment, I am. And so that it's just a process. I don't know if I went where you were wanting
No,
to go, but
no,
yeah.
it's totally, no, it's totally, and I won't go there in this, in this, talk. But yeah, yeah, it is. There's a lot. I've been on a journey for a very long time, and, I'm nowhere near whatever the destination might be, because there really isn't
There is
one
no
if you ask
destination.
me. Yeah.
Yes.
But I will say I am, and I tell people this, a lot, and I've said it many times over the last almost, like, 10 to 15 years I've been saying this. The person that people get to see today, this Kendall Patton that's on screen with me
Mm-hmm.
right now, is not at all 5 years ago. You know
Mm.
what? To be real honest with you, a year ago, I was in a different place, and
Yeah.
I was unable to be at the time because of lots of stuff and grief. There was grief and all sorts of things, like some deep grief, but I was not really able to be this Kendall that you see today. But the person that people see today who has the ability to be outgoing, who can be confident, who can, delegate, who can do all these things, this was stuff that I didn't learn until I was an adult.
Yeah.
And so yeah. But
And
anyways,
so
we're
many
not
of
going
us
to go
are,
there.
yeah, but I mean, just to name, like, so many of us have to um, relearn or learn for the first time how to be in relationship, how to
Hmm.
be in the world connected to others. And
Hmm.
you're definitely not alone in that. I have definitely been through quite a transformation myself, and a lot for me. It's coming back to who I really am. As things happen to us in life, we get, as I said in the beginning, we get turned away from ourselves. It becomes too painful to look at. We believe the story that we're not okay, that we're not good enough, and it is a process to turn back toward, and it's a journey, And so each of us carries our own unique story, our own unique set of experiences that makes us make perfect sense however we're showing up. So
Yeah.
if 5 years ago, I, and this is actually true, when I first got injured, I would come home and I was grumpy all the time. I was like just miserable, and I was not the person I wanted to be. It was not even the person I knew how to be because I was not resourced.
Hmm.
And I make perfect sense in that moment.
Yep.
Of course, I'm not. I've just been at work. My doctor's restrictions have not been honored. I've had
Hmm.
to stretch beyond. I am in physical pain. And so we always make sense. And that's really the key, that we have really good reasons for all the behaviors and all the learning curves that we're on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really
Yeah.
the bottom line. And as we get to know ourselves, as we are willing to get closer, we get to really transform in magnificent ways. We get to be 1 year later in such a different space. And yes, there's still things to work on. I have mountains of grief,
Yeah.
wells of grief, oceans of grief. And I am in such a radically different space because I am willing to seek out warm relationship, and I'm willing to bring that warmth to myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard work. And sometimes there's rest and all. And I mean, I think that we could just keep talking. But I have
Yes,
noticed that it's been about an hour. And
great.
and and as much as there's a part of me that's like, well, we could just keep going, there's a part of me that's like, okay, we have to honor things here.
And self-care is
So
important. It's really important part of loving yourself and loving myself is saying, hey, we didn't get to boundaries, but this is a boundary.
right, yeah, this is a boundary, exactly. But before we go, there's two things I want to do before we go. So I always do Starlight round questions, which are like surprise questions.
Okay.
They're like hard but easy. And there's only three. Yeah, there's only three. So if you would be willing to answer them, and the thing is, the only thing I ask for people is just answer it. Don't think about it. Just answer it.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll do that, and then we'll definitely make sure that we cover all your social channels and stuff, so people can go see what you're doing, go connect with you, and all that kind of good stuff. Okay. So here's the question. We'll start with. I'm going to start with this one first. What is your biggest life or business challenge, and right now, and how would you like to see that change, and then how can we help you?
Yeah, so my biggest challenge actually is putting myself out there into the world, letting people know what I do. I think that's my biggest challenge. So part of that is saying yes to things like this. This I've been this year I've been saying yes to things that are really scary. Things that I'm like, I'm not so sure. Like I taught a class to 18 people yesterday, and just being like, okay, I'm just going to see how this goes. I'm going to trust in my knowing. So I think that's my biggest challenge is like overcoming the fear that my authentic being will not be accepted by the world, and being willing to be authentic anyway,
Yeah.
So that's part of self-love and self-acceptance. And how you can help, just having me on here, it's been really great. If what I've shared is meaningful and resonates for you, reach out to me. There's so many wonderful resources out there, including myself, but also like great books and other things. If coaching is not quite as up, I mean, it is incredibly courageous to choose to do this kind of work. And it's not for everybody. It is for everybody, but it's not for everybody right now in this moment.
Yeah.
You have to, if it calls to you, reach out. If you're curious and you're not sure, reach out. I think that's the best. And yeah, for me, it's really personal work to just continue to challenge myself to show up in whatever way feels good to me in that moment, and to be compassionate with myself when, I mean, like, of course it's totally scary, it just makes perfect sense to me. It's not easy.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great big one, and I'm honored that you're here. So, okay, and let's see. And the more of your stuff that I see, the more I'll share it. But I think you already know that. Anyway, so tell me one of your biggest personal changes in the process of building your business.
Yeah, so I think building my business has really challenged me to love myself more. I really think that is the biggest change. It sounds hokey, but it's true. I think it has just really forced me to look underneath the rug and really look at who I am, how I want to show up, like what's really behind this, and I think. So I think the biggest change has been being more willing to be myself. And I'm just kind of repeating the question. So my previous answer, and so I'll just add in also the biggest personal change is to learn to value myself. It continues to be a challenge to say hey, I charge this much, this is what I do. And to just really learn that the gifts that I offer are worth something, that my own soul spark offers something, that my light is important. And that's a continuing process.
It is a continuing process, especially as a business owner.
It's really hard to step into entrepreneurial space. It is an incredibly, and to have you be the product is the most difficult thing, to actually say that my services is what I'm offering, and this is the power that it has to transform, or this is this is what this offers you is an incredibly challenging thing to just own and say, actually, yeah, that I would buy this. I want this. I have bought this. I have wanted this, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get it. Okay, last Starlight Round question
Okay.
is share with us your biggest dream goal for 2019.
I think my biggest goal would be, I think to just really embrace my voice and maybe I think now I'm overthinking it. To be willing to step out and do some group coaching as well,
Okay.
And to consistently maybe have a wait list. That would be such a big dream to have a little wait list. Yeah.
Yeah. That would be fun. That would be so fun. You know, it's and I'll tell you one thing that I often think of when I think about what is my dream goal for this year. Doesn't mean it has to be different than my dream goal last year or the year before or 5 years
Yes.
ago. And so long as I'm working towards that, because at least in my opinion, or at least the way that I'm looking at things these days, is that I really have a dream goal every day. And so those dream goals of every day are really part of this bigger goal. Like, because the bigger goal may be a tangible thing in some way, shape, or form, like having a wait list or having group program or something like that. Or for me, it would have a lot of big dream goals.
I have so many, so it's hard to choose.
Right, like one dream goal for me. I'm not going to say not this year. There's the fear that says no, not this year. But one of my dream goals would probably be no, wouldn't probably be. I know is to be on stage somewhere. I don't know where or doing what necessarily. I mean, I think I know, but maybe not. I'm waiting to hear some more. Um, but I think. But that's the thing about dream goals, right? Because technically, every day I get to do that. Every day I get to go into the online space with a client or with another online business owner or with people who even don't own a business or maybe are starting a business. And every day I get to show up and say, this is me.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I don't know. And that may sound facetious to some people, but for me, it's like really deep. So, but anyway.
No, I think it's really. I think what you say is really true. And I mean, I have so many goals, and it's such a big like to ask what's your dream goal. There is that little voice that's like, oh, that's really scary to say that. Like, what if I don't achieve that? You know, and I think the bottom line is I just want to like really own my authenticity. You know, I really want to continue on the path that I'm on and like really just find my people. Like I've already found so much of my tribe, but to continue to actually, you know, just really honor myself. And that's really hard work. And so what that would look like is, yeah, just saying like, yeah, I'm going to run a group. Okay. You know, I'm going to do that. You know, it's a sort of like, it's kind of like what I've been doing this year already, which is like, sure, I'll teach 18 people. That's terrifying. Sure, I'll teach 26 people. I'll do 50, you know, whatever feels good to me, and just say yes, even though it's outside the comfort zone.
Exactly. But that's where the fun really happens, or at least that's my experience. But listen, Jaya, I am just so pleased and so honored to have had you on today. Had a wonderful conversation with you, as I would have expected if I had put expectations. And I just really appreciate all the things that you shared, your personal transformation, your personal like knowledge that you've picked up, experiences that you've had, just information that you have to share with others, with ourselves. And I just really, really appreciate that a lot. But we do want to make sure that if people are interested or they just even just like who you are and your personality, that they can just kind of follow you and stuff in the online space. So if you would just real quickly just share your social channels so that we can make sure that that's been put out there. And of course, we'll drop them down in the links below. But we definitely want to make sure that you get to say where you're at and where you'd like to be found.
Sure, thank you, Kendall. So you can find me on Facebook at Coaching Compassion with Jaya Manske, and I'll put the link down below. And you can find me my very humble website at coaching-compassion.com. And yeah, that's probably the best way is probably on Facebook to find me in this moment. Yeah.
She's all over Facebook, people. Don't let her fool you.
And
in a good way.
I hated Facebook. Just like, it's only 2 years ago I finally posted my first photo of myself on Facebook. Like, it's been like there's a transformation for you to be willing to actually do that.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Hey, I still struggle with it. So
yeah, and
anyway,
but it's fun to realize that there's other heart-centered folks out there that are just looking to connect and really dive deep instead of just talk about superficial stuff.
Totally get it. I totally get it. I'm right there with you.
Community, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Kendall.
Yeah, no, it's been a really great conversation, Jaya, and I am so thankful that I'm not thankful that your power was out this morning and it made you try to find something else. But I am thankful that you were able, to be able to find somewhere else so that you could still come on and still be present and be here with me. And I just love, love, love that you're outside and you're just kind of chill. I mean, you're Jaya, but you're just kind of chill and relax and just here having these moments. And so I just really, really thank you, and I appreciate that. I encourage people, please go check out Jaya online. On Facebook, she's at Compassionate Coaching on Facebook with Jaya Manske, or just look up Jaya Manske. The link will be below. And then, of course, our website is compassionate hyphen or dash.
Coaching dash, yeah.
Oh, coaching dash. I knew I was going to mess up.
No, it is totally fine. It is totally fine. That's why the link will be below, too.
That's exactly why there's a link below. Don't rely on my mouth.
No, it's all
So,
good.
but thank you again. And everybody just, like I said before, if you're watching the replay, if you're catching us, just let us know below that you've watched the replay. If you have any questions or comments or things that you'd like to share, things that you want to know, please just let us know. Put it in the comments. Jaya and I will be looking for those things. You can tag us or just put it, and we'll see it and we'll take care of that. And of course, I'm Kendall of New York Transcription and Content Creation Services. Outside of the Sparkle and Shine series, I work with online entrepreneurs. Well, I even work with small business owners in person to help them to refresh their content. So if you do videos or you don't like to write and you record your own audio, talk to me and we'll see what we can do with that and help you to regain more time and freedom to do some of the things that you love so that you can participate in those self-care things. So anyway, Jaya, thank you again. I hope you have a great rest of the day. I hope your power is restored shortly and it's not out for much longer.
We will see. I don't know. And I just want to really thank you for having me on. And for those who haven't seen what Kendall does, she's magic with what she can do. I was so amazed to really see what you bring to life. So it's such a gift. It's one of the hardest things to do is put your voice and your ideas into copy, and Kendall does that for you. It's amazing. So
all you have to talk. All you have to do is talk, or make a video. And yeah, I thank you, Jaya, for saying that, because Yeah, Jaya. See, I have a
You
trick in my head for saying your name, and I was like, oh no, I forgot her name.
no, you got it. You got it.
I was going to call you by the trick that I have. But anyways, but thank you, because you made me feel a little bit bashful. But that's part of being out here, right? It's like, I don't want to be seen, but I need to be seen.
Yes, it is part. It is part. It's what I mentioned was the biggest challenge. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but anyways, thank you so much. And I know that we've been on a little bit longer than expected. So I hope, like I said, I hope your power's back on. I hope you have a safe drive back home. Enjoy some more beach and sand
Yeah,
and all that good
I'll
stuff.
post a picture. I almost feel like I should show you the beach before I go, but I'll just post a little picture below. I don't know.
Awesome. That would be so fun. Thank you again. I hope you have a great day, and we'll be in touch. Okay. I'll see you
Okay.
around.
Thank you, Kendall.
Bye.
Have a wonderful
Bye,
day. Bye
everybody.
bye.